Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Gleaner podcast. I'm Chantal Hortop, managing editor for the Gleaner and host for this season of the podcast. As you may know, the Gleaner newspaper is celebrating its 160th anniversary in 2023. As we mark that milestone, we're taking the chance to look back at the history of the Chateauguay Valley, both distant and less so. In today's episode, we'll be talking about something whose origins date back even further than the Gleaner, but that so many people who live in the valley today remember fondly. The Nutcracker, put on by L'École de Danse Neva Shelton, is a holiday tradition that began 33 years ago in the valley. Today, we invite you to listen in on a chat between Neva Shelton and Erika Rosenbaum, who happens to have been part of the very first production of the ballet in the valley in 1990, and whose children are carrying on that tradition. While many of those listening know a bit about the Nutcracker, this chat is a fascinating look at the ballet, from the big picture down to the local history of the production. As we step into the holiday season, I can't think of a nicer way to launch our podcast season than with this festive topic. Without further ado, I'll pass this over to Neva and Erika.
This is Erika Rosenbaum for the Gleaner podcast. It is December 13th, and I'm sitting in the kitchen of one of my favorite people in the world, Neva Shelton. Hi, Neva.
Hi, Erika. I'm pleased to be here with you.
I'm delighted to be here, too. And if I can keep my giggles under control, we're going to have a nice chat. We're going to talk about the Nutcracker and a little bit about you and your background and your, we'll only be able to cover some of your many contributions to the fine arts here in the Valley. So yeah, let's dive in. A little bit about the background of the Nutcracker.
Okay. The Nutcracker was first performed in Russia, in St. Petersburg, at the Mariinsky Theater, way back in 1892. The music was composed by Tchaikovsky, but he had a lot of help because the choreographer, Marius Petipa, was a taskmaster, and he told him what type of music he needed to compose for each role. If obviously, if it's going to be a Nutcracker, it's a military type music, and if it's a fairy, it's not a military type of music. So he followed the directions of Petipa, and the first Nutcracker was just a 2-act ballet, not as long, and it was called the Nutcracker Suite. And as I say, it was performed in 1892. At the time, though, a connection to our school, the newly employed second ballet master at the theater was Enrico Cicchetti, who was renowned for having taught Anna Pavlova, one of the first prima ballerinas, and he had developed a method of teaching that was becoming more and more well known, particularly at that time was for professional dancers. But in our school, we follow the Cicchetti syllabus, and we do enter students into the Cicchetti exams, which are it's very serious business. Not everybody rigorous, and not everybody gets to do an exam. But there is a Cicchetti Society in Canada, and I'm a Cicchetti teacher, Cicchetti trained. I have my diplomas, and have been involved with the Cicchetti Society for quite a few years. So our students have gone on to do exams up to the advanced level, which is a professional level, pre-professional level. So we have our own little connection to the very first.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I found that out, and I went, wow, that was kind of neat. So he was training the dancers. He was, working on their technique and such for before their performances.
I always envisioned the Nutcracker being a symphony that was then choreographed into a ballet, but it really was built for dance.
Yes.
That's so cool. I didn't know that.
Well, that's it in terms of the history of the Nutcracker. It came from a book. There was a story about the Nutcracker and the Mouse King, and they created the ballet for that. Eventually, it was expanded into a full-length ballet, and in sort of the 60s, more and more large companies started to perform it, and it became very popular. And in some cases, it's so important to a company because it is still so popular that sometimes it's like 40% of their income from ticket revenue is from Nutcracker.
So that's the show that can carry the company sometimes. Yeah, because to me, it is a classic, right? It is a part of Christmas. It's the music and the play. It is a part of the Christmas story. It's so intertwined with the holiday season, you know, no matter whether you celebrate Christmas or not. That's like part of November, December, preparing for the holidays is Nutcracker. Do you think there's a reason that it has become this sort of pillar of the ballet world? What is the story behind that? Why is it so important to companies? Why that show?
Well, certainly I think the fact that many companies bring in children as part of the show, and they are part of the party scene there, and they have their dances, and they have a major part. And some companies will have a ballerina playing the part of Clara, the young girl who has dreams. She receives a Nutcracker and then dreams of him coming alive and fighting off the Mouse King, etc. But I think the fact that in many, many ballets there are children on stage, that children can relate to it. They can relate to the type of dancing they're doing, the acting, and of course it's full of acting as well. It's not just the dancing, and I think that makes it much more accessible to people who perhaps aren't as enthusiastic about classical ballet, but when they go to see the Nutcracker, they can relate to it. They can see what the movements mean, and the joy behind the skipping and the hopping and the galloping, the military moves that are very stiff.
Yeah, the characters are very clear.
Very clear.
Yeah, and you don't have to understand ballet or classical music necessarily to really appreciate the Nutcracker. So you're right; it really brings in a wide range of audience, and I guess it brings in generations of a family, right? So you could. I think I went to the Nutcracker with my godfather, who is now in his 70s, and so you would be able to enjoy it when you're 8 for the first time, and still enjoy it when you're older and grandparents' age, because it really is for everyone. When you're older, you get to appreciate the music and the movement, and if you're a dancer, obviously you appreciate the ballet. But if you're none of those things, you can just appreciate a great show. So yeah, that makes sense. And what about the history of your production? See, I love this part selfishly because I am part of the history of your production.
Definitely. Yes, you were one of the first Claras. The very first year we put the Nutcracker on in 1990.
Well, don't give away my age, Neva.
You were one of two. You and Yvonne Blondy were the two Claras who were chosen for those roles. And we had 6 performances because it was popular, but we also invited schools to come. We put it on at CVR and had daytime performances so that the local elementary schools could come and see it. But of course we started from scratch, and it was a bit crazy to think we could do it all from September to December and costumes and choreography, because I choreographed the whole thing.
Yeah, it's an original show. I mean, that version of the Nutcracker is all your choreography, your original work.
Yes.
That's wild. As somebody who has choreographed before, I know how much work and effort and timing and perfecting that it's a bonkers amount of hours. That's absolutely incredible to me. And we continue to do roughly the same choreography year to year in your school, correct?
Yes, we have changed some things, and of course over the years I have more advanced dancers, and so we have tweaked certain roles to make them more difficult. And at one point one of the things was the stage. We used to perform the snow dance in not the whole stage. They had a second line of curtains at the back of the stage at CVR so that we could change the backdrops. And so we would close those while we were changing backdrops to the second half of the show, which is Candyland, from the part in the living room of a fancy house. So it was limited. We cut the music. It wasn't as long. We also didn't have dancers who'd been on point for a long time. The dancers in general the first year were somewhat younger. And so eventually, after several years, we expanded that dance to be the full length of the snow dance. And we then had a different system where we had the whole stage. And by that point, we had more advanced dancers who could perform it, because it really does. I mean, it looks much more impressive if you have 10 snowflakes as opposed to 6. And I think the first ones we did were maybe 8 at the most, but it wasn't as big. There weren't as many, for sure.
For us dancers, the snowflake dance was always the dance to go for if you were coming up as a young dancer, because that's the very difficult and very long marathon of point work, and it's fast and it's technical and there's a lot of action on stage, and it's sort of unrelenting. And so we all go, oh, it's so hard, and we sweat and we whine about our toes, but we loved it. Like, we all aspire to do that dance. Then when you get there, you feel like you've made it. You're one of the big girls and you're doing the hardest dance. It was so exciting. I loved that feeling, and I love that dance. It's really beautiful. And so the production that year, I feel like all those backgrounds were hand painted. Were those all hand painted backdrops?
Yes, they were. The first year we had a smaller backdrop for the party scene, and we put it on portable panels, the McDougall Hall panels. Right, yeah. We hooked it up. It didn't go to the ceiling. And then in subsequent years, we expanded it to go the whole length. Of course, now in this day and age, for quite a few years now, we have a video on the back, projection, which really comes alive, because now the Christmas tree really grows and it sparkles and there's magic, and there are candles on the mantelpiece, and the maids come in and blow out the candles and they go out, and it's very different from the original when it was all painted and they would carry little fake candles onto stage. Obviously, we didn't have real ones. But yes, so it definitely has changed as well. The first snow scenes had been a snow scene for CVR had done something, and they didn't use it anymore and lent it to us as a backdrop. And then eventually, and at one year, one of the students, Jackie Garceau and company, and all her friends painted the Candyland in her basement. Oh, wow. So that was another whole project. And then after perhaps 15 years, my neighbor, who's an artist, started doing backdrops, which could be put together and certainly fit at Valspec, because we eventually moved to Valspec to put the show on, which was a much bigger stage, bigger backdrops, which could be hoisted up on these poles and then taken away up to the ceiling. And so she designed them, and parents helped to paint them backstage at McDougall Hall while kids were rehearsing. But she did them in separate panels, so sort of a paint by numbers. And of course, she's done many murals, large murals, so she really understands how to do that. And so it was wonderful to have these beautiful backdrops for each of the scenes, and that sort of upgraded everything.
And what about all those costumes? I mean, I remember what we wore the first years of Nutcracker, and really the costumes have changed over the years. That's one thing that has really grown and changed with the school, because I know it was parents, it was volunteers, mums and grandmas that did costumes early on, sewing in their own kitchens, and now you have a whole set of new new costumes that have come out over the last few years, and you have a actual costume designer working with you now, right, Richard?
The first costumes we had, the party scene, I put a call out, does anybody have old-fashioned dresses? And we spruced them up to make them look older, but the girls' dresses, in many cases, people had given us those dresses, because to make all of them was really a huge undertaking. As it was, we had, the traditional ballet costumes for the fairies and things like that. We had to sew them, so there was a tremendous number of costumes to put together. I will say, at that point in time, more parents sewed.
That's true, yeah.
Your mom helped sew, and
all those clown costumes in my kitchen.
yeah.
Thanks, Debbie.
And I also remember, because I was just so stressed and working 7 days a week, late nights, I ended up getting sick as well. So it was really quite a stress to get through all of it. But I sent out an SOS to my mom and dad, and because Christopher was only 5 at the time, so they came and stayed and took care of meals and what have you, and helped sew costumes, and all the little soldier jackets that had to be put together. There was always one or two that weren't finished yet, so the last week before dress rehearsal, you were putting things together. So it was a crazy time, but we got it done, and it turned out better than we thought. Well, I was thinking of even the dances, that we were getting close. It wasn't dress rehearsal, but we were getting close, and Hugh came in, my husband, and was watching the flower dance, and there are so many people on stage for the flower dance, dancing all different ways. And he looked at me and said, "Are you sure that's ready?" Anyways, then dress rehearsal showed up, and everybody's in costume, and of course it made so much more sense to him, because then he could see that the greens were going around the outside and the pinks were going around the inside, and then the yellows right in the middle, and he realized there was actually some method to my madness.
Yes, indeed. Yes, the Waltz of the Flowers, it remains one of my favorite dances, and there's something about that music, no matter where I am and no matter what time of year, I hear that music and I get this weird rush of, I don't know, endorphins, adrenaline. I get goosebumps, and because I feel the end of the show. I feel it in my body. I feel that crescendo, and I feel it's half the company or half the school on stage during that number, right? And you're with all your friends, and you've worked so hard, and the music is just growing, and you're excited, and then it ends, and the audience goes wild, and it's such an incredible experience, and that music brings me back immediately. And I have this weird physical reaction. I get goosebumps every time. My heart pounds. It's just lovely, and it's such a beautiful classic piece of music. So yes, Nutcracker, big love for Nutcracker. It's amazing. It's so easy to sit in the audience and look on stage and see your 6-year-old waving, and you think it's adorable. And it's really hard to appreciate how much work and how many people show up to make that happen. In some case, for you, months of preparation, and for many others, weeks of preparation, and so many hands go into a show like that. It's lovely, and it's a gift to our community. We've been so lucky to have the Nutcracker here.
Well, and I always say that it's only as good as all of the parts, and that every child is important, every parent who helps is important. Certainly you were talking about costumes. We have been incredibly lucky to have Richard Hansen fall in love with our school, and he's a wonderful costume designer. In fact, he does hair, he does costumes, he's a wig maker, he has so many talents, and he just recently won an Iris. He's known in Quebec for his work in film, and he has such an incredible eye, and he really thinks outside of the box, as much as you and I will think outside of the box in terms of dancing and changing a dance to adapt it or to do. He does that with costumes. He takes a costume we had before, and he grabs secondhand clothes and he tears them apart and puts them back together and takes curtains in some cases that were at a secondhand store and had stains, cuts out the stains, and makes the most glorious dress that you've ever seen that you would think would cost $1,000 to buy it. He really has upgraded our costumes, and he looks out he'll say, oh, next time we have to fix those, they're not quite up to par, so I'm looking, what are we going to do there? And a few years ago we totally redid all the soldiers and put them in green instead of red jackets. But his versatility in terms of his imagination just seems to have no bounds. And it's been wonderful for all of us, including parents. Again, people who say, well, I only sew a straight line. And by the end of it, they're sewing a whole lot more than a straight line.
Absolutely. Richard affects everybody in the room. And we're all more interesting when he's with us. It's really, we're very, very lucky. And he's danced with us, which is, I mean, he really does do it all, which is beautiful and so much fun. And I love that he's the kind of designer that upcycles, that really does go looking to make something better rather than buy new and create something out of nothing. He's got this, like you say, he's got this wonderful imagination, and he's got a really sort of postmodern approach, and he tries to create without creating all kinds of waste. It's never unnecessary. He always finds something unique and interesting and makes it better. It's so cool. I'm lucky. I run into Richard in both parts of my work. He works in film, and we've crossed paths there, and then he's at ballet. It's delightful. We're so lucky. We really are surrounded by such a creative community here.
Yes.
It's really not something to be taken for granted. Small town Quebec, not everybody is this lucky, I think. No, we're very fortunate.
Sure. Well, and Mark and Tina Bai certainly helped a lot when they had Grove Hall, and they also helped with Nutcracker. Mark took it up a notch with lighting once he started to take over it, and he would design our lighting, come out and look at and even see the little changes we have made, and he would change it. And when we changed our backdrops to more of a video backdrop, he adapted the lighting in accordance with that. And we've been very lucky to have some very professional people involved with that. Tina would come in and give us tweaks about the acting in the party scene, and all of that really helps. And again, that, as I say, it's as they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It's the same in terms of the Nutcracker. I really feel that it's so many people that come together to make it a good show, and it makes us all feel good to be part of the team. I've seen so many parents who at first weren't so sure, and do I have to be backstage? And then at the end of it, they go, "Oh, I love it! You can see the dancing, and you're standing in the wings watching your child and seeing the excitement and seeing all the things that go on." And they suddenly realize, well, they're not penalized by being backstage. They're actually having a wonderful experience. So it really changes things, which is theater in general.
100%, yeah. And I mean, production in general, that expression, oh, it's a whole production. Well, it is. And every single person, like in film and television, every single person is there for a reason. And they bring something unique to the team, and it takes all of them or all of us to make the creative vision come to life. And that's what I love about my job. That's what I love about ballet. That's what I love about L'École de Danse Neva Shelton, is that beautiful teamwork and sense of accomplishment when everybody's working together. It's so exciting. And really, it's not whether you're on stage or not at all. It is very much if you're a part of it. And that's something really unique to what we do at work and at play. We get to be a part of it, and then you all walk away with this
team.
Yes, this teamwork. I guess it's probably like being on a sports team. You walk away with that high, that feeling of accomplishment. Yeah. Runners get that apparently, but that's not me. Okay, so just in terms of where you have come from and the growth of your school over the last, how many years have you been running this school?
My first classes in Ormstown were way back in '79, where it was just a few classes. I started in the rec center, then moved to McDougall Hall. Then the second year I had people come to me and said, will you teach in Huntingdon? Will you teach in St. Chrysostom? And then it took off. And those people helped to spread the word and help find places for us to teach in. And certainly we've moved to different locations over the years, depending on population, depending on teachers' availability, on all kinds of things. But so now we're in Valleyfield. They used to have a ballet school that was run, I think, primarily by a committee, a parents' committee, but eventually that disbanded, and people who had been training there came and said, would you teach there? Because I was not going to try and step on anybody's toes by going there. And so we started teaching in Valleyfield as well. We no longer teach in St. Chrysostom. Again, it just depends on teachers' availability and spaces and students. But we're still in 3 places, Ormstown, Huntingdon, and Valleyfield. And certainly now we have the children of former students coming in and taking class, and that's kind of fun to see, that the parents, they have their own memories and want their children to experience the same thing.
I love that. I love greeting those little girls on Saturday mornings and getting to see all their moms who I danced with. And, we grew up and we have all these stories that we share, and we get to still see each other on a sunny Saturday morning in this beautiful space, but now we're watching our girls, and it's lovely. And you're still running the show, which is really cool. Well, you're lucky. You have such a wonderful group of young teachers that you've trained who are, carrying forward and bringing their own unique abilities to your team. And it's lovely. You've got such great teachers on your staff, and they're all former dancers of yours. And so they're well trained and they do a really good job. My girls really love their teachers. So before I let you go, I just wanted to know what you thought of dance today. Because when I look at popular culture in general, dance has really sort of hit a spotlight moment, I find. It is everywhere. It is every time I open my phone, it's on TV, there's all these competitions, there's a whole new interest in dance, and I'm curious, what is your view of dance today, and where do you see it going in the future?
Certainly one of the things is with the media we have now, that it's so accessible that if you're interested in ballet, you can find all kinds of clips and dances and all kinds of things on YouTube, on all different places. You can find and see and watch dance. So it's much more accessible in that sense. Also, it's dance itself. All kinds of forms of dance have become much more popular due to all of the competitions. And so you think you can dance and you see all different dance forms. And you also hear the judges saying, well, you need to brush up on your technique, which does say something to ballet, that that's where you get your technique from. So as opposed to, maybe 25 years ago, when you were probably in your teens, when there was a point in time, I had been teaching for 10 years perhaps, there was no ballet anywhere. There's no more ballet. There used to be many years ago something called Les Beaux Dimanches in Quebec, and they often had ballet on Les Beaux Dimanches. And when they cut out Les Beaux Dimanches, it was much more rare to see any ballet. And I started having people come and say, well, what is ballet? And we had a harder time convincing people to come and take class because they didn't really know what it was. So certainly part of us doing Nutcracker for the schools was a somewhat of a promotion to show children what ballet is, not just to get more students, but to educate them as to what it is. Now that is less so because I always remember at one point Ballerina Barbie came out and suddenly more kids wanted to take ballet. And those things we can't do anything about as a dance teacher. You don't have control. It's the same with skating. When the Olympics are on, everybody wants to be a skater. So that kind of thing is out of our control. But nowadays, there's far more access to all of it, which helps a lot for people to have more education if they are looking at that. It all depends. And of course, as with everything with nowadays, is that it depends on what you're seeing, whether you're introduced it at home or at school, and if you're not, you're still not going to see it anymore.
Yeah,
so
exposure makes all the difference, for sure. I do feel like there's a different level of acceptance now too for dance. I think it has always been this way at L'École de Danse Neva Shelton. People have always been welcome, regardless of age and shape and skill level. There has always been a place for somebody who is curious about dance, and I've always enjoyed that. And now I feel like it's like that everywhere. There is really a much more open mind about ballet, what it is, people's willingness to explore it and to find a place for themselves in dance in general. I think everybody who is curious about dance can find a place for themselves, and that's really exciting to me. When I was dancing in the city, anytime there's no class with Neva, I find a class in Montreal, and there are often players from the Alouettes that will join class because a lot of professional athletes understand the value of dance for their agility and flexibility to avoid injury, and it makes you a different kind of strong. And I feel like it wasn't quite like that in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't as common to see other kinds of athletes and people in your class, and now we see it more and we understand it more. It's a lot more open. There is a place for everyone, and people are more willing to try it.
Well, I think in so many things, you get CrossFit where people are doing, and you get even in sports where you're not just doing one thing, you're also training other muscles which are going to improve your performance in whatever your chosen sport is. And it's the same with ballet, that there are certain things that ballet really helps with coordination, with perception and awareness of all the different body parts and moving them all at the same time, which not everything does. And so, and the other acceptance is just in all kinds of dance. Yes, so with a lot of the TV shows, I just feel that people are introduced to so many different kinds of dancing, and it really has opened people's minds to it. Also, gender, that there's much more acceptability for boys and men to be dancing all different kinds of dance, not just hip-hop or break dance, and that's really changed the acceptance of it. And I think certainly in schools there is still some prejudices in some areas, as with all kinds of things, but for the most part, children don't get this as much backlash, whereas it used to be that boys, as soon as they hit grade 1 or 2, were very wary about taking ballet. It was harder for them, or they would just say, I dance. They wouldn't say what kind of dance they do. But I always find this really interesting. The place that we've always had the most boys, and regularly every year have at least 1 or 2 boys, is Huntingdon.
Oh, interesting.
And we had one little boy went on at 9 years old. He did the Nutcracker with Les Grands Ballets. He didn't go on to be a dancer, but he just loved dancing, and he was just such a bright spark, and they loved him, and they said, "Oh, come and do the Nutcracker with us."
Cool.
So it's interesting. I mean, I've had boys in Ormstown, St. Chrysostom, Valleyfield, but Huntingdon has been the place that most often I've had boys dancing.
You know, I could talk about ballet all day, about your involvement in ballet, about my history and what it means to me, because that's the first stage that I ever got on, and you know, obviously that led to a lifetime of performing for me, and a love of the fine arts and the performing arts for myself and for young people in general. I think that there's so much to be gained to explore by exploring that at some point as a young person. I mean, from great posture to confidence and the ability to use your voice in so many powerful ways. And of course, I have you to thank for that, because I started with you.
Thank you very much. It certainly has been an enjoyable journey. many, many years.
Indeed.
And just to wrap up, would say that if people have the chance to go and see Nutcracker, if they haven't seen it yet, you can either watch it on TV. There are many versions, including one with Macaulay Culkin from Home Alone, and as well as live performances are always exciting, whether they're professional or not. So go out there and see what the Nutcracker's all about.
Absolutely. It's a great holiday story. Anyway, thank you so much, Neva. This was lovely, and I hope we get to chat again.
Thank you, Erika.
What a wonderful look at the Nutcracker and ballet in general in the Chateauguay Valley that was. We are so lucky at the Gleaner to have these two wonderful women agree to get together and share the history and their memories. This was the first of 10 episodes slated for this first season of the podcast, so we hope you'll check in again next week to listen in on a chat between two farmers who lived and worked on Covey Hill for nearly a century. That episode will be available next Wednesday, December 27th. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the Bourse d'Initiative en Entrepreneuriat Collectif, a call for projects designed to support the creation and development of social economy enterprises and projects across the Montérégie region. Sound editing for the Gleaner podcast is done by Stacey Pennington. Our theme music is by Christopher Pennington. It's produced by me, Chantal Hortop. Don't forget to subscribe to the Gleaner podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode. For more Gleaner content, check out our website at www.the-gleaner.com. I'll also put that link in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you'll join us again next time.